Religious freedom. Why one woman is on trial for a Bible verse tweet. Dual dilemmas. President Joe Biden tries to keep Russia and COVID at bay. Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts offers his pandemic response. Masks in schools. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill speak out about coronavirus restrictions. And the price you pay. Why the U.S. economy is facing even more struggles. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of the conversion of St. Paul. I'm Tracy Sable. The trial has begun in the case of a former government minister in Finland who is facing 3 criminal charges for tweeting a Bible verse. Päivi Räsänen was Finland's interior minister from 2011 to 2015. She pleaded not guilty in her trial, which began yesterday in Helsinki. She and a Lutheran bishop are accused of ethnic agitation, which falls under the war crimes and crimes against humanity in the country's legal code. Her legal team is led by Alliance Defending Freedom. And joining us now is Lorcan Price, International Legal Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. Lorcan, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Could you give us the background on this case and tell us what Bible verse the former minister placed on Twitter?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. So this case began in 2004 when Päivi Räsänen published a document, pamphlet about the nature of marriage, the Christian understanding of marriage for the Luther Institute, which is connected to the Evangelical Lutheran Church, which is her church in Finland. And in that document, she explained well-known Orthodox Christian teaching on the nature of human sexuality and marriage. And that document was published and remained essentially unknown other than to the community of Lutherans who would read it, until in 2019, Päivi tweeted criticism of her church, again, the Evangelical Lutheran Church, for their decision to sponsor the so-called Pride Parade in Helsinki in Finland. And she tweeted a verse from Romans about the sin of pride, and she asked the question whether or not the church could celebrate something in the circumstances of the Pride Parade and all that's associated with that. And as a result of those two things, a criminal complaint was made rather about them. An investigation was opened by the police, the Helsinki police, and she was interrogated on a number of occasions for over 10 hours about, first of all, the tweet and then the document she published nearly 20 years ago at this stage. And during this whole time, there was media interest, as you can imagine, in Finland. She gave an interview on a lighthearted radio station, the Ruben Stiller show in Finland. And she then as well speculated about why it is that some people identify as homosexual and others do not, and so on. And this gave rise to a third criminal complaint and ultimately criminal charge against her. So for essentially expressing her beliefs in written and spoken word in public in Finland, this well-known, long-standing politician was faced with 3 criminal charges.
Wow, this is so shocking. Why is this so important for the faithful and for religious freedom specifically? And also, if you don't mind, Lorcan, can you talk about, is this part of a larger anti-Christian attitude taking place in Europe right now?
Well, it's certainly important to deal with the first part of the question, because if you have a situation where well-known Christians in their own community, so in this case Finland, cannot publicly share their beliefs, their deeply held beliefs as Christians on the nature of marriage, the nature of human sexuality, without facing possible criminal investigation and then ultimately criminal prosecution, it has an enormous impact on the freedom that everybody else feels as to whether or not they can share their beliefs. And we call this the chilling effect. It means that where you are afraid that you'll ultimately face severe sanctions for sharing your beliefs, for sharing your views, you'll be more reluctant to do so. And this is precisely the danger associated with these hate speech laws. And you mentioned the problems associated with, in particular for Christians, and I completely agree that these laws proliferate across Europe. Virtually every European country has hate speech laws, and they are designed to protect usually what are identified as marginalized communities from incitement to hatred. But because these concepts are so nebulous, they lack precise legal definition, you find a situation where in the United Kingdom, in Finland, in France, and in many other countries, Christians are at the receiving end of police attention simply for quoting the Bible, simply for talking about long-standing Christian belief on marriage, on human sexuality. And as issues such as the transgender ideology grows stronger and stronger, even questions like describing man and woman and how God has created them can give rise to criminal investigation and possible prosecution. So this is a big problem, certainly for Christians.
And Lorcan, we don't have a whole lot of time left, maybe about 30 seconds or so, but as we reported, the trial began yesterday. Can you tell us how it went and how do you expect this to play out?
Yeah, so we're very happy with how things went on the first day. The prosecution spent a lot of time trying to essentially criticize the fundamental tenets of Christianity and in many ways tried to characterize the Bible as a hateful document. We don't think that the judges hearing the case were terribly receptive to that. The case will continue on the 14th of February. It's been adjourned for additional arguments at that point. And we're quietly confident, we're certainly praying for a good outcome there. And if the outcome is not good, we will certainly appeal it, but hopefully it will be dealt with definitively on the 14th of February, and a major victory for free speech for Christians and indeed for everybody across Europe will have been won.
Well, Lorcan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and we'll continue to follow this case. Lorcan Price, International Legal Counsel from Alliance Defending Freedom. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Here in the United States, President Joe Biden says the U.S. may directly sanction Russian President Vladimir Putin if he launches another invasion of Ukraine. This comes as thousands of U.S. troops remain on high alert for potential deployment to Europe to support the NATO alliance. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. President Joe Biden originally did not have anything on his public schedule today, but then this afternoon he left the White House, stopped by some nearby businesses and got a little ice cream, did a little shopping, and then he told reporters traveling with him that there's been no change in the posture of the Russian forces.
So everyone from Poland on has reason to be concerned about what would happen and what spillover effects could occur. We have no intention of putting American forces or NATO forces in Ukraine.
But President Joe Biden is sending more military aid to Ukraine, unloaded from the plane, defensive equipment and munitions. And back in the U.S., noting that Ukraine is on the border of several NATO allies, White House Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner says,
if the international system is to mean anything, it should mean that no country can change another country's borders or affect another country's government by force.
And with about 8,500 U.S. troops now on heightened alert, the Pentagon says its job is to provide the commander-in-chief with options.
I certainly would not rule out the possibility that we could be putting additional forces on heightened alert in the coming days and weeks.
Meanwhile, President Biden and the nation continue battling an enemy that knows no borders, COVID-19. Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts told me how his state is responding to the pandemic.
Well, what we have always done is look to make sure that we are providing hospital capacity to the folks who need it. That's been our North Star throughout the entire pandemic.
As for that federal vaccine mandate that recently got shot down?
Well, I was very happy to see that OSHA mandate get struck down on a variety of different levels. First of all, we've managed here in Nebraska to be able to provide those hospital beds, as I was talking about, to manage the pandemic without lockdowns, statewide mask mandates, vaccine passports, anything like that.
Separately, with the March for Life still fresh in people's minds and hearts, the governor feeling good about 2022.
So I think this is going to be a really big year for the pro-life movement. In fact, I just saw a headline that majority of millennials now believe we need to do more to stop abortions. So I'm really encouraged by what's happening here.
Also tonight, the Biden administration has officially withdrawn that OSHA vaccine requirement for large employers, so it is officially dead. In my interview with Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts, he told me President Biden's vaccine mandates went against our system of government. He called them counterproductive because he says they breed resistance. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Nationwide battles continue over kids in the classroom between parents, teachers, and school boards over mask mandates and curriculum. Republicans are demanding more parental rights. They see these issues as another opening to win back Congress in November's midterm elections. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with more. Eric?
Well, Tracy, Republicans are confident that they will take the House come the midterm elections later this year and possibly the Senate. So they're positioning themselves to make a priority parents' rights and education a top priority, a national priority. And they say that their constituents are telling them that they want their kids back in the classroom.
Kids need to be in school, right? And parents need to be able to choose where their kids go to school. So first off, if you gave parents more choice, they would be sending their kids to schools that are open. So, but the teachers union, of course, they want to control everything.
He's not alone. Republicans claim teachers unions are using mask mandates as an excuse to have students learn online. Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri says he's asked the Biden administration to look into why math and science achievements are down.
I wrote a letter to the Secretary of Education expressing our concern that all of the indications are that kids don't do as well not going to school in most cases as they do going to school.
Senator Blunt tells me he's yet to receive a response. Other Republicans tell me the Biden administration has to do more.
I think most rank and file teachers want to go back, but some of our teachers unions are standing in the way, and President Biden refuses to stand up to them.
A great education is the most essential building block in the foundation of a child's future.
Representative Julia Letlow is a former educator and is one of 160 Republicans who have signed onto a parental rights bill. The bill calls on giving parents the right to know what their children are being taught, calling on parents to have the right to be heard, calling on parents having the right to see the school's budget and spending. Parents have the right to protect their child's privacy, and parents have the right to keep their children safe.
As Republicans, we believe that education works when it's a true partnership between parents and the learning environment that works best for their child.
As for the bill itself, so far it's been blocked by Democrats to be able to take it to the floor for debate. But Republicans plan to make this issue a centerpiece if they win control. Tracy?
Eric, I want to switch gears here to the situation in Ukraine. I understand the Biden administration held 2 classified briefings today for congressional leadership aides and committee staff members.
Yes, they certainly did. As a matter of fact, both House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer are calling for chamber briefings from top military officials to be able to find out, and from the White House itself to be able to find out more information about what's happening in Ukraine and the border there. Those are going to be taking place possibly next week. Tracy?
Okay, thank you so much, Eric. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reporting tonight. Coming up, stocks rise and fall and prices at the store jump as the number of products drop. Learn what's fueling the economic uncertainty. Volatile, that is one word to describe the stock market this week, swinging between steep losses and gains as investors try to gauge the risk. Factors such as high inflation, supply chain issues, COVID-19, and the possibility that Russia will invade Ukraine have all contributed to the instability in the markets. And joining us now to discuss is Joel Griffith, research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Joel, welcome back. Always so great to see you. Let's get right to it. Let's talk about this roller coaster ride happening on Wall Street. What does it mean for investors, the economy, and how concerned should we be?
Well, for those that have investments in the market, this week has been definitely a roller coaster. Even intraday, we see price swings of several percentage points. This has not happened in a number of years to see this type of volatility. You have to go back to the start of the COVID pandemic, and I think it underscores the economic uncertainty that we're facing right now. We've had our market, the housing market, the stock market, other assets that have been pumped up by the Federal Reserve. We've had our Federal Reserve print trillions of dollars in order to fund the government spending, nearly $6 trillion supposedly to combat COVID. And there's a lot of uncertainty now, especially as we see the economy slowing down. And you still see several million people that have left the labor force since the start of the pandemic. These are all cause for concern.
Yeah, and you had just mentioned the Federal Reserve. As we know, Chairman Jerome Powell is going to hold a press conference about the interest rate hikes that are still to come in March. Talk to us more about that. What are you expecting to hear from him tomorrow?
Well, if you look at what's happened over this past year and a half, you had the federal government spending so much money, and all of that came from borrowing or from printing. And as that money has been released in the economy, that is part of the reason why you have seen prices increase at such a rapid level. And it's really starting to hurt families. Most of the people that are watching tonight have seen their cost of living increase in excess of what they've actually seen in terms of take-home pay. And a big part of that is because of the central bank's actions. And the fear is that a lot of this new money that's been printed, the fear is that this will be lent out and then deposited and then lent out again. And it turns into this multiplier effect of new money circulating through the economy. And that's why there's talk of raising interest rates in order to stop some of those new loans from potentially being made. There's really no easy way out of this. No one wants to see higher interest rates personally because it means that your debt costs are going to rise. But also, people don't want to see their cost of living continue to increase at the pace that we're experiencing it now. Government has caused this problem, and there is no easy way out of it.
Joel, do you think there's any relief in sight, when it comes to inflation? And also, should we be worried about something called stagflation? I've been hearing a lot about that today.
Well, there are a number of causes, primary causes of inflation. Now, part of it has been the rampant money printing, but there's another side of that as well, and that's that we've seen our supply chain really messed up over the past year and a half, in large part because of COVID restrictions that have been put in place, not just here, but across the world. And that means ports that have been shut down, either partially or completely. You've seen shipping delays. You know that warehouses are packed to capacity in large part because we can't find workers to staff them. And you see trucking shortages as well. And there's many causes for all this. Now, as countries around the world finally begin to fully return to normal, I do think we're going to see some of those supply chain issues clear up. And that'll relieve some of the inflationary pressure. But unfortunately, we see a large number of actions the Biden administration has done, both in terms of incentivizing people not to work, in terms of the government printing money and more spending. All of those are going to be long-term price pressures. So despite the fact that the supply chain issues are clearing up, there are other concerns that I do think will continue to put upward pressure on prices. Now, stagflation, that's really a combination of slower economic growth combined with higher prices. And if government continues down this road of suppressing supply and disincentivizing people from work, if you continue to have schools that continue to shut down and parents not being able to be on the job, well, all of that is going to weigh on economic growth. And you very well could see slower growth along with a rising cost of living. And that would be the stagflation that none of us want to experience.
Joel, less than 30 seconds left, but I really want to ask you this question. As you probably heard, President Biden is now considering severe economic sanctions against Russia. That said, what type of impact could the conflict between Ukraine and Russia have on our economy, if any at all?
Well, what we're seeing right now with the hostility of Russia towards Ukraine and threatening an invasion, this directly stems from the Biden administration's weakness that they have exhibited from day one. Remember, from day one, the Biden administration completely capitulated to Russia's demands to go ahead and build a natural gas pipeline to Europe. This threatens our national security interests. This has threatened the interest of our allies. And if there is conflict, further conflict in this region, there is going to be an overlap because Ukraine sits along the borders of many of our allies and is directly related to so many of the countries that we actually trade with and are engaged with in the investment world. So this would be a very real threat to our economy as well as to our allies in Europe.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Joel, thank you so much. Always appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Up next, danger overseas. North Korea hits the launch button again. And we are tracking major societal shifts in Germany, how they could affect the Catholic Church. North Korea launches 2 missiles into the sea off its east coast today. This is the country's 5th round of weapon launches this month. Military officials say both South Korea and the United States are analyzing the launches. Our Catholic bishops in Germany are supporting a new initiative that calls for a change in the church's teachings about gender and sexuality. The hashtag Out in Church for a Church Without Fear campaign launched yesterday and gave a list of 7 demands, including that, quote, defamatory and outdated statements of church doctrine on sexuality and gender need to be revised. And joining me now is AC Wimmer, editor-in-chief of CNA Deutsch. AC, so great to see you. As I understand, a group of 125 Catholic employees in Germany say they're part of the so-called LGBT community. What more can you tell us about that and some activities that took place yesterday?
Sure, Tracy. Thanks for bringing me onto the program. Yes, so there's 125 roughly people that have outed themselves as being a part of the LGBT community in a number of different roles. These are Catholic priests, employees of the church, teachers of religious studies at state schools, which in Germany do have religious lessons, including in Catholicism for Catholic students. The whole thing was part of a major campaign, a media blaze that you had all across both social media channels that were launched for the very purpose, a new website publishing a manifesto with 7 public demands, and a primetime documentary on the big German national television program ARD. All of this in a concerted effort that was accompanied by a number of public statements, including from the German Bishops' Conference and a number of bishops in open support, welcoming the initiative, which was called Out in Church.
Why are the bishops supporting a campaign that challenges Catholic teachings? What can you tell us? Why?
Yeah, so that's the central demand. Absolutely right, Tracy, you've nailed it. It's a demand to change teaching of the church. But when you look behind the scenes, it's about a lot more even than that. The Catholic Church is the 2nd biggest employer in Germany after the state, in fact. Hospitals, schools, churches, administrative centers, all sorts of things are part of the church and are embedded in the tax system. This means that many people work in the Catholic Church, but perhaps not all of them are as committed Catholics as some others might be who don't work for the church. And this creates an interesting conundrum when you want to employ people who perhaps might consider themselves LGBTIQ or something else that does not fall in line with normal Catholic teaching about sexual morality, but they don't want to be fired either. And this was the central core of, or the central issue at play behind the scenes. Number one. The second issue, of course, is the fact that there is a reform process, they call it underway in Germany, the synodal way, the synodal path, not to be confused with the synod on synodality. And this process is very much intertwined with the demands of the LGBTIQ agenda put forward yesterday, and that is also being supported in public by the German Bishops' Conference, in particular by the bishop responsible for the forum on sexuality in the synodal process, Bishop Helmut Dieser of Aachen.
And AC, I wonder if you can quickly tell us what has been the reaction among the faithful to this campaign?
Well, I can tell you that the Facebook comments, in particular on the CNA Deutsch, the German edition of the Catholic News Agency, and on blog posts and social media, what you hear around the traps, have been nothing short of scathing. A number of bishops who might not be in line with the demands made for a change to the church's teaching so far have been very reluctant to come forward and make public pronouncements, but I expect this to happen in the next coming days and weeks. There is no shortage of negative comments, but there's also no shortage of public support in Germany, in particular by the state media and other players, political players, for instance, for this push and for the LGBTIQ initiative Out in Church.
And AC, we're running out of time, but quickly wondering what else you are following in Germany and what else you would like our audience to know.
The ongoing abuse investigations being published by German dioceses and involving both Cardinal Reinhard Marx and his predecessors, in particular a rather famous one, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, are looming large in the public conscience and part of our ongoing coverage from here that you can find out about, of course, on CNA, both in English and in CNA Deutsch in German and across our agencies.
Well, AC, thank you as always for your time and your analysis. Always appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Finally tonight, a New York man who recently turned 45 years old received a promotion at work today. It was from Pope Francis. Father Joseph Espaillat was named auxiliary bishop for the Archdiocese of New York. Once he is consecrated, he will be the youngest bishop in the United States. The 45-year-old goes by Father J. He hosts a YouTube series called Sainthood in the City. He also wears Air Jordans and discusses faith mixed with sports and music. Very cool. There's a second auxiliary bishop in New York, Father John Bonecci, shown on the left right there. He is the ripe old age of 56. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.